Hello everybody, it's Mr.Po. It's another episode of Fishy Hours, and today we will be talking about weekly maintenance and why it is important not to skip weekly water change. If you watched my last IGTV vlog, you have probably seen that I was talking about the consequences of me skipping one weekly maintenance, and there was some visible results after that, or rather consequences, because it's always a risky thing to skip one water change. So a lot of beginners, people who want to start this fish keeping hobby, they ask me this question: is it okay to skip one water change? Is fish keeping difficult? How much time does it take to perform this weekly maintenance of aquarium, and etc, etc. So that's the questions that worry them a lot. And one of them is skipping water change because we are all preoccupied by many things, you know, our work, and we can be overwhelmed by some problems. It can happen to anybody. So that's the question that always comes into minds, because people are afraid that if they skip one water change, something really bad may happen to the tank, etc, etc. So we will talk about this in this video. My answer to the question: is it possible to skip one water change? Yes, it is, but at the same time it's a risky thing to do. And why? Let's just talk about nitrogen cycle first in order to understand why weekly maintenance is so important. So there is such a fundamental concept to understand for any fish keeper, which is called nitrogen cycle. You have probably seen a lot of videos on YouTube and a lot of web articles on the web about that. And they can be a little bit tricky and complicated because they sometimes focus on biochemistry and ecological system studies and everything. So I will try not to be that complicated in these terms. I will try to make it maybe a little bit generalized, but at the same time comprehensive and short. So nitrogen cycle is the cycle of water in a pond, a river, and in aquarium. But in aquarium things are a little bit more complicated because the functioning of the whole ecosystem in your aquarium depends entirely on you and your actions. And it's a very close ecosystem. It can be a little bit small if you have a nano tank, for example. So the whole balance in your tank is really highly dependent on any actions that we take with this tank. So well, nitrogen cycle is a process which is natural for any water source, any biotope. And we need to keep this cycle running in our tanks, establish it. The question is how to establish the nitrogen cycle and why it is so important. What happens with water when we add it to a new tank? For example, you have a new setup, you have gravel, live plants, water, filtration system, light running in your aquarium, everything looks good, and you want to add some fish immediately, maybe after 2 days when you made this setup. So you go to the fish store, you buy some fish, you put them here, they look happy, they look active, but after 2 or 3 days you notice that, you know, they die. All of them may actually die. And the result of this thing is really devastating to anybody. Sometimes beginner fish keepers, they even dump the hobby after that because, you know, they maybe do not understand what happened and they are really upset because it's really upsetting. And the reason why it happened is the lack or absence of nitrogen cycle in your tank. That's why it's so important. Nitrogen cycle helps to keep the water healthy and habitable for your fish. That's why priority is to establish this cycle. But how to do that? And what is the chemistry behind that? When you add some new water in the tank, it starts, after some time, it starts producing a lot of ammonia. It's a natural process for water. And ammonia, as we all know, that it's a very highly poisonous chemical, and nothing alive can be in ammonia-filled water, no matter what it is, a fish, a snail, or shrimp, whatever. So it's a highly poisonous chemical, highly poisonous, and in order to get rid of it, we need to disintegrate it into some less dangerous chemicals. For example, nitrates and nitrate. So how to do that? In order to get rid of ammonia, we need to have beneficial bacteria in our tank. So what is beneficial bacteria? These are like tiny little organisms in your tank that happen to be after some time, and they grow on your gravel substrate, on your decorations in the tank, and most importantly in your filter that you put in the tank. That's why filtration should be running, and you need some period of time in order to grow this beneficial bacteria. So the rate growth of bacteria may vary, and it depends on many factors, on the size of the tank and conditions here, whether there are live plants or not. So let's say with live plants, we are talking about the aquarium with live plants. In a month, beneficial bacteria should be enough. And when there are enough numbers of beneficial bacteria, what they do, this bacteria, one type, they consume this ammonia and turn it into nitrates. So nitrates then are consumed by other type of beneficial bacteria and turned into nitrates. And nitrates serve as a fertilizer for your live plants. So if you have live plants, these live plants help to recycle their nitrates. They use it as a fertilizer and grow. So when you see that your new plants in your aquarium start growing, it means that the cycle is probably established because there are already nitrates, and nitrates are consumed by your plants and then they grow. So that's how plants help to establish the last step of the nitrogen cycle. So if you see your plants having new leaves, or maybe they become bigger, etc., etc., it's maybe probably the time to introduce the fish in your tank. So well, that's how nitrogen cycle works. First, ammonia is produced. It is consumed by one type of beneficial bacteria, turned into nitrates. Nitrates are consumed by other type of beneficial bacteria and turn into nitrates. And nitrates are consumed by your plants. And plants, because of these nitrates, they grow because it's like a fertilizer for them. And these plants produce oxygen. And oxygen is consumed by your fishies. So that's how this nitrogen cycle looks like. So I hope that it wasn't very complicated. This is a very symbolic, very generalized version of the process itself. Now comes the question, how does it relate to weekly maintenance? It's very simple. When you got rid of your ammonia during the cycle, it doesn't mean that it cannot go back, because it always comes back with your fish. When your fish eat something, sometimes uneaten food is left. And they also produce their own waste. And it creates again ammonia. But when you have beneficial bacteria, this ammonia is recycled then. But sometimes beneficial bacteria is not enough. When there is too much ammonia, we remove some amount of this ammonia by doing weekly water changes. We vacuum the gravel, we remove some water, add some fresh water. That's how we help beneficial bacteria to consume ammonia. But when we skip one water change, there can be build up of these poisonous chemicals, and there is no longer enough beneficial bacteria to consume it on their own, and it may result in ammonia spike when you have a sudden release of too much ammonia and it kills everything in your aquarium. So that's what happens when you skip one water change. You never know how much ammonia you have if you do not have a water testing kit. So if you do not have any means to test your water for ammonia, nitrates, and it may happen, it's better to do this weekly water change, because you never know what your water conditions are, and visually you cannot tell, because when you see some visual changes in water, for example, the water is cloudy or it's dirty, obviously, maybe it's too late, maybe there is already ammonia spike in your tank. So my piece of advice is, if you do not have water testing kits, if it is impossible to test your water for nitrates and nitrates and see what is the percentage of it in your tank at the moment, and ammonia should be always zero, if you do not have this opportunity, it is better to do this weekly water change and get rid of these problems, because maybe it will be too late if you don't do it. That's how it relates, and that's why it is so important to do this weekly water changes. And my piece of advice, if you have an opportunity, it is better to do it than not to do it, because if you don't do, you never know how it ends. So you see, weekly water changes are not that time consuming, they are easier to perform, and they really reduce the chance of having some problems, bigger problems like ammonia spikes and everything. So well, thank you so much, and I hope this video will be helpful to anyone who wants to start this wonderful hobby, which has a lot of challenges as any other hobby as well. But in the long run, if you have enough experience and you are really passionate about what you do and you are prepared for it, it may bring you a lot of positive emotions, definitely. So thank you so much for watching to the end. I really appreciate that. Also check out my YouTube channel because all the videos are also uploaded here. So thank you very much. Stay safe and see you in the next episode.